Today's show is brought to you by our Extra Mile community on Patreon and mpb.com for quality used camera kit with a guarantee. Buy, sell, trade and create with mpb.com.
It's the Photowalk. You and I making some pictures with our cameras or smartphones, sketchbooking our walk together, enjoying the letters and the inspirational stories you sent in. It's a show for photographers of all flavours. It's a show for those who like walking, actually. It's a show for explorers and those who find escapism and peace away from the noise, with a spring in your step and a picture to remind you of where the footprint was left. I'm walking today with Sir Barkalot. So far, well behaved. We've been wasting a lot of time of late having to shower you when we get home because you like to roll yourself in anyway. Let's move on. Now, before I make my opening picture, last week on the show I walked along a path I absolutely love, but I did endure the, oh, don't say it, Neil, I'm going to, the midge attack. I do make a fuss about the midges, I appreciate, but anyways, later on in the evening, after I'd wafted my way through the midges during our photo walk, I had a chat on Zoom with a prospective client, and halfway through the meeting I just happened to scratch my temple, and there was a lump the size of a small island in the Maldives. It was one of those nasties that had given me a proper bite, proper nibble. So guess what I'll be adding to the checklist today? Write a picture. Hold on, pups. I want to get a picture. I started today on an estate called Englefield Estate in Berkshire, and I made a couple of pictures. I might put them on the show page because it was indeed a part of my walk, but it was just full of signs saying thou shalt not go here and thou shalt not go there. And whilst I appreciate that there are conservation projects going on, a lot of people doing good work, at the end it felt like it was an A to Z of conservation project thou shalt not go here signs. So I've come along to my canal and I'm going to walk along this. Let me make an opening picture. Lovely sunny day, f7.1, shutter speed 320, ISO 160, just across the canal. There we go. Another one. Perfect.
Today on the Photowalk.
So today on the show, and I'll come to my guests in a moment, of which there are three. Three guests, yes, three. I'm treating you to three voices, talents, creatives today. The very first letter is going to be one shortly that surprised me to such an extent. I've been thinking about it ever since I first read it back in last week. We've been talking about it much at home as well. I'm going to introduce you to a phenomenon that I hadn't heard of. I wasn't aware could possibly exist. It's very real though, and for those who make photographs, it may well explain why photography is such a precious thing. I was a bit of a loss as how to mention it as well, because for some listening now it may come as a shock, and I don't think I'm being too melodramatic there. Also today, a story that underlines that inherently there are a lot of good people on this planet, despite what the news may lead us to feel and believe. It's a story of the walking stick and the trail walkers. It's almost a good title for a book, although it's got walking twice in it. Now I have to work on that one. We travel to Swedenland too, where summer is just turning up at platform 2. And we have an interesting story that proves if you print your work and you leave it somewhere, you never know who may pick it up. Now, guest-wise, imagine having a camera put in your hands at the age of 3 and then pulling your first print from a developing agent only a few years later. Just how much of an inspiration for a young, inquiring mind could that be, eh? I know not everyone is into printing photographs here, but there can't be many more magical tactile experiences than watching a photo come to life in the magic waters under the red light. No wonder my guest today from Holland, Luc van Vliet, has such an affinity with making pictures, and what he chose to photograph has led him to a career making long-term projects about the landscape. But I'm not necessarily talking about landscape photography in a purist sense. I'm really referring to the way that we experience the landscape, and that could sound like the same to some, I appreciate. But there's a subtle difference, as you're about to find out, when we talk about his extraordinary long-tail projects, and one in particular, Earthly Windows. Also today, a second guest in what will be a regular second Friday of the month home for my newly titled Roughly in the Middle of the Show feature. Valerie Jardin with Street Visions, ideas and learnings shared from photographs she's made. You're invited to be a part of a short street workshop, if you like. So that's roughly in the middle of the show, as the feature title suggests. Let me play a couple of short teasers, though, from what's to come. And that includes a guest who Extra Milers heard this week, a friend of the show, Matt Delinsky, talking about mental health and photography. So, Luc van Vliet, Valerie Jardin and Matt Delinsky, in that order, coming up now. Guests atop your letters as we walk today.
The Photo Walk.
For me, what I find wonderful about photography is, and especially in the way that I work these days, that I always create these montages to get closer to my experience of the reality of it. Everybody just experience it right away as a real perceived reality.
You have to use ways for people not to notice you. I mean, those are tricks to become invisible, which is really what the street photographer should be, is invisible, even though you can be within just a few inches from people.
I put up a video the other day saying the person staring at you in the mirror can be your worst enemy, because I think we do put ourselves down too much. We do listen to that little whisper in our head saying, no, you can't do that.
Luc van Vliet, Valerie Jardin and Matt Delinsky are my guests on the Photo Walk, brought to you by our Extra Milers and mpb.com, which is a great way to buy and sell and trade used camera gear online. And I know this because I use MPB myself to buy quality new-to-me kit. I've bought lenses, I've bought camera bodies and other accessories. I've bought speed lights. So if you're buying, you get peace of mind because there's a 6-month guarantee. And if you're trading or selling, MPB will send a courier to pick up your kit on the day you tell them. And once it's arrived back at the warehouse and they've checked it out to make sure it's been graded properly, you get paid direct into your account quickly. mpb.com is an easy-to-use website, and it's helping photographers to buy quality used kit or sell gear you no longer need to free up some cash and give others a chance to make their stories. Go to mpb.com and, of course, I will put a link on today's show page. Right, checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots and smidge. What? Not yet a sponsor, no, but the UK's #1 midge repellent. Hang on, let me wink. Check. Let's start the walk.
Right, I have a brace of thoughts to start the show today from Mark Bagent in Essex in the east of England. Turn left at my grandfather's old sweet shop on the Great Cambridge Road. And you'll find Mark just along there. Red pullover. Yeah, that's him. There's a sort of light-hearted start, and then a real, what, Neil? What? Really? Is that a real thing? Really? Kind of letter. So, from Mark Bagent. Grumpy from Essex here. Oh no, stand by. This is in reply to something on last week's show. I'm listening to your normally relaxing podcast, Photo Walk, when the discussion about how people perceive wedding photographers arose, and it made me cross. I could tell. I managed a wedding and portrait studio for 2 years. I shot a lot of weddings, and they were the most stressful days of my whole photography career, so much so that I escaped to the much more relaxing world of shooting architecture and stock. Where can I get a job like that? The responsibility of recording one of the most important events in people's lives is heavy. The wedding photographer has to cope with people and weather and whatever is thrown at him/her during their one chance to get it right. The thought of failure cost me peace of mind and much sleep. I have endless respect for those who step up and shoot weddings. All the best, Mark. Just for context, the conversation wasn't so much about how people perceive the business, people generally, that is. Though actually, I can't tell you, Mark, and you've probably found this yourself in the time that you did them. I can't tell you the amount of time somebody on a Saturday sidled up to me and said, "So, what do you do for a living during the week then? What's your real job?" I'm never quite sure how to answer that one. It used to happen a lot more in the days when I was shooting a lot more. I think it's been accepted more as a job these days. I don't know, 15 years ago or so, many people used to ask me that question. It was undoubtedly one of the most regular questions next to, "How many snaps have you made today?" I don't know why I did it with an inflection like that, but snaps used to... I'm not very keen on the word snaps. I initially tried to educate them in the, "Oh no, there's a composition involved, rule of thirds, da-da-da." I don't bother with that anymore. But to the one when I'm asked how many pictures or snaps I've made in a day, which is perhaps not too daft, actually, if you think about it. But I usually take a few moments to feign the fact I'm thinking, I'm considering an answer, and then I'll go, "Ooh, I don't know, 4.5 gallons, maybe 5, and leave them thinking that it's some kind of special photographic metric. And I've a whole ream of teases for somebody who can't quite believe that this is my real job. When I'm asked, actually, what do you do during the week then? Come on, what do you do? What's your real job? I've answered very solemnly at times, in whispering tones, "I'm a mortuary assistant." And watch their faces. Although my favourite tease is the Euro Millions winner one. "Oh, no, I don't work for a living. This is a hobby. I won the Euro Millions about, 2 years back. I do this for free." And then I sort of ramble on about the venue and the weather of the day. And you can tell they don't really want to talk about that. They're itching to ask, "Well, how much? How much did you win? What does a Euro Millions win look like or sound like?" So I usually, after a while, they'll ask, and I'll say, "Well, look, put it this way. I don't travel first class when I go abroad. I take my own Learjet." But the subject of the perception of wedding photography was more to do, in this case, really, that conversation we had last week, with how agents in photography view wedding photographers. I think the term suggested was Mickey Mouse. And as much as I winced, and I did, it's absolutely true that the serious agencies, the agents, the managers, the galleries, the gallerists. Is there a gallerist? I don't know. I think there is. Wouldn't even entertain somebody who is by trade a wedding photographer. If they looked on their website, or your website rather, and saw a wedding a photographer, they'd probably choke on their Garibaldis. And then perhaps a slightly more serious toned letter to add to the brace from Mark. And this is following on from one of the first letters that he sent into the show. So we could be creating a Mark Bajent season here, or a mini Bajent season at least. Hi, Neil. It's a strange sensation hearing somebody talk about me on a podcast, but it's fun nonetheless. I've no idea if this will interest you, but I suspect it may. Mark, I have the advantage of knowing exactly what I'm about to read, and it not only interested me, I'm sure that it's going to truly surprise some in our community today. A bit of waffle will follow, says Mark. I'll be thinking and typing at the same time, which never ends well, but here goes. Firstly, yes, I was told by a teacher that I was thick. After 6 years schooling, it was discovered that I was short-sighted and couldn't see the blackboard and wasn't learning because of it. But by the time the issue was discovered, it was far too late. I was behind and labelled as trouble. Re my love of photography that I told you about, it has changed my life, but I just made a discovery that adds to the importance of photography, to me, at any rate, even more. I'll start with a question. And this is, I think, audience participation time, actually. I'll be very interested, as I read you Mark's question, I'll be very interested to hear how you fare with this. Mark writes, if I were to say, see an apple in your mind, do you actually see one? And if you do, is it green or is it red? Any more details about it? Please answer this before reading further. So there we go. I've asked the question, did you or can you see an apple? Park your answer, and I shall share mine in a moment with you. I don't, says Mark. I don't see one. I thought the mind's eye was hypothetical or a turn of phrase, but my wife and daughter actually see images in their minds. I was blown away when I found out. But it seems that I, and many millions of people, are aphantasic. And what does that mean? Well, we can't see images in our minds. And this is a very real phenomenon. It actually gets worse because I can't see images. I forget what people that I've loved and lost look like. I don't have any visual clues for calling up memories. I'm 67 years old and I've only just discovered this as a science. So imagine how important photographs must be to me. I have to say, Mark, I get letters on all kinds of subjects, all kinds of personal matters too. And this really was like a bolt out the blue. I had a, is this a real thing reaction when I read your letter. And I think when I recall one of my first YouTube films for the new Not So New channel, this is going to be a subject. In your letter, if you'll let me read it there, I think it's going to be a really interesting subject to make one of those initial films about. And by the way, I did see an apple, a juicy green round one, although I know it's not a competition. And I asked my wife the very same question, and she said she saw the sort of apple in that picture with the men in the bowler hats. Who was that artist? She did say at the time, I can't remember now. However, in terms of older memories, faces for me, I don't recall quite so deftly from my youth. Anyway, I went to look up aphantasia. Not that I doubted you. I was simply fascinated. Turns out that this is a phenomenon first discovered 143 years ago, give or take a few months, but it was only in 2015 when a new study started to investigate it, if you like, with inverted commas, properly. A 2020 study concluded that those who experience aphantasia also experience reduced imagery in other senses and have less vivid autobiographical memories. Look, I'll leave a link to the wiki page because it gets quite in depth, and it will take you on a journey if you get interested in this. I'll pop it on the show page today, and I'll find a film as well to go with it. One thing I did read is that IQ levels are elevated in many aphants. So there's one, Mark, to stick in the pipe of the teacher that accused you of being thick so early into your schooling. It really does underline why photography is important to you, Mark, for a whole host of reasons. And thank you for opening the show with that letter. It's a subject I have no doubt there'll be some listening now. Some of my, or maybe my other listener, will think, hang about, I never realised this. I can't see the apple either. It's almost to be continued, ... We just had another run-in with a swan. Along with the midges, it's taken over from the boot in the water that was the theme of many a conversation with you during the winter. But swans, honestly, I don't know whether it's just along here. You might well have different experiences, in which case, please, illuminate me. But they're horrible here. They've just got such a... There's another one here. Pups, come here. Let's move away. No, don't go to him. This way. They've just got a really ugly personality. Swans along the River Kennet. It's like a get off my land kind of mentality. Get off my water kind of mentality. They're horrible. They come up to you hissing. I'm thinking, well, just swim on the other side. Got nothing to do with you that way. I don't know, maybe the ugly duckling story is an interesting one, isn't it? The ugly duckling wanted to turn into this beautiful swan, didn't it? Or something like that. Well, actually, the ugly duckling had a lovely personality. It wasn't about what you looked like. It was about the personality that you had. Hang on. I see. No, I don't. Anyway, from I knew I'd get this wrong. Edit this out, Neil. No, keep it in. It's real. Aphantasia. This next one's going to challenge me. To archadophobia. Archadophobia. Neil, edit it. You'll sound so much more clever. Next week we'll do the letter B. We started with the A's. Thank you, Dennis of Linden Vale, for your bear scat identification guide. We've been talking about encountering bears on your walks. It occurred to me in those Norwegian mountains where I was walking a month or two back that the brown Eurasian bear of Norway was native. And at the time I was thinking, might I? Because I was very much on my own at points. I'd left the trail. I was walking down trails that are walked, but not very regularly. And I thought, hang on a minute, is this? Do I need a bear scarer? But you have to be very unlucky to meet one in Norway. Apparently, there's they number only in their hundreds, and it's a huge country. And apparently, they sense humans. They smell us at least a kilometre before we arrive anywhere close to them, and they're off. So that they don't really trouble walkers. So archadophobia, hello, Pinstriped Express, is the fear of bears. I certainly don't sense that's too much of an issue where I am, but in America land, 40 states are home to black bear, for example, and they can wake up in a rotten mood. So I guess it's something, you might want to comment on this. I guess it's something that you might think about on some of your trails. But thank you for the scat guide. If I see any of what you've got on that guide, I shall walk the other way quickly. Next week I'm walking with extra miler and survival trainer Andy Fisher. It's a walking show in Snowdonia with our cameras, of course. I'm not sure you'll find any bears in Snowdonia, since I think the last I looked up, not that I was thinking too much about it, but just from intrigue, I thought, what might you find in the mountains there? The last one left in about 1800, so not too many bears. Should actually say, is it the correct or the new pronunciation? It's not so much new, but the pronunciation that's being now used is the Welsh one, isn't it? Eryri National Park. Eryri, I think I'm saying that correctly, National Park. Talking of bears, I tell you what, it's link after seamless link, isn't it? This is a letter with accompanying picture on the show page from our friend Richard Smith. Neil, recently my wife and I went hiking the many trails at the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Park in northern Michigan, on Lake Michigan, on the Old Indian Trail, which is a couple miles hike through woodland to the dunes, where we came across a couple called Gary and Sandy hiking. And as you do, we stopped to talk. I wouldn't do that, Richard. Keep walking, I say. Pick up some pace in case those sleeping bears wake up, fancy themselves a photographer for lunch. Oh, that looks tasty. Don't mind if I do. Just spread some honey on. Anyway, says Richard, Sandy was using an interesting wooden walking stick. It had a lot of very unique and interesting carvings on it, and she told us the history of this important stick. Her brother was a Vietnam War veteran and had suffered what we call, or know today as, PTSD. In the 1990s, an Army Lieutenant Colonel at West Point was studying the effects of PTSD and studied 7 suffering veterans. And he subsequently wrote a book, On Killing, which discusses how the armed trained soldiers were taught to kill and how they struggled to re-enter civilian life afterwards. It turns out Sandy's brother was one of the 7, and part of his recovery was to do something creative, and so he carved interesting walking sticks. Making hiking sticks was his hobby and something people in their family had done for generations. A while back, Sandy and Gary went on a trip to Minnesota, and on the way in Wisconsin, they hiked a trail and later realized, when they were 450 miles away and 25 miles from their destination, they'd left the walking stick on the Wisconsin trail. No! So, when later their vacation was over and on the way back to Michigan, they stopped by the trail in Wisconsin, and her walking stick was exactly where she left it. Many hikers must have seen it there, but realized it was special to somebody, and they'd no doubt be back to collect it at some stage. So it was left alone on the path, waiting for its rightful owner to return and collect it. Gary makes homemade syrup, and he actually left a jar of it at our car in the trailhead parking lot. What a pleasant surprise to find at the end of our hike. Hikers and photo walkers are very good people, says Rick. Rick, that is a wonderful story. Obviously, I'm glad the lid was on tight of the syrup, maple syrup, because those sleeping bears, I tell you what, I'm sure a whiff of fine homemade maple syrup will be enough to wake them from the deepest slumber. I'm going to put that picture on the show page today, your picture of Come Away From There, Pups. Oh, it's right by, that's very deep there. You're getting brave. I'm going to put a picture on the show page today, that portrait that you made of Gary and Sandy. And if you look into the picture, you'll see that special stick in the picture. It could have been actually included in last week's assignment, couldn't it? So I'm a bit torn. That would have been a perfect story to go with the assignment. I'll think about that anyway. Let me introduce my guest. That will rescue my tornness over this. I'm in reactionary mode from last week, which I really enjoy doing that when we get a story and I think, oh, let's make that next week's topic of conversation, or we'll make them next week's guest. Because last week is when I first introduced you to the work of Luc Van Vliet on this show, whom, to be fair, you might have known already. There's a possibility, of course. He is a long-tail photography project maker, a man with patience who makes the most incredible books to go with his work, as you're about to hear. The way we experience landscape is the theme of his work. It's a perfect fit for this show, and in particular we're going to talk about his latest work, which is also a book and an exhibition called Earthly Windows.
Look, you graduated the Royal Academy of the Arts in 2010, and you've subsequently spent over a decade now making these extraordinary long-term photographic projects about the experience of the landscape. And for many of those who listen to this show, the experience is the pertinent word, photographically, of what we walk in. And I would include the landscape as being perhaps street photography too, because that's a landscape of its own. You've turned this, though, into a life study. I mean, I'm intrigued as to how you knew that this would be your calling.
Well, that's probably quite a long story, but at the age of 3, I started taking my first photographs. No. And then, 3. That's where it all started. And then I went to the Royal Academy of Arts, and I started doing documentary projects, portraits, things like that. And then I did a really nice internship with a portrait photographer, Jan Banning, very great Dutch photographer. Yeah. And then I started doing a project on a specific area in the Netherlands near Air Force Base. And then they said, well, the F-35s will come, but they will make more noise than the F-16s. And therefore, part of the town needs to be destroyed. And then I got interested. How do we actually deal with this environment? That if something from the outside changes, now all of a sudden the entire living environment of people change. And that actually caught my attention. And then for whatever reason, I started delving into landscapes and left all the people, everything outside of it. Yeah. Even though they're always part of my photographs.
They're not devoid from your pictures and your photography. And actually, even, and we'll come on to some of your more, if you like, quiet projects later on, where you can still see in the background, you see the huge chimneys, expansive chimneys on shorelines. It's not as if you've walked into forests to find the quiet. You're always examining the quiet alongside the noise.
Yeah, that makes quite a lot of sense. When I first started photographing landscapes, I got this idea, or I found this in a book, that a landscape is actually always, or comes about in the interaction between the natural environment, in the interaction with people or with humanity. So I'm always looking for those traces of mankind, but I want the natural environment to dominate those parts. But it's in a way subtle, but I always want something of humanity in there.
Yeah, I just want to rewind a bit through your life, actually. There was a video I watched of yours where you cite a David Hockney painting as something that's been extremely inspirational to you. When you saw this piece, you weren't even into double figures. But now, knowing that you started photographing at 3, that doesn't exactly now surprise me. It's clear that you had this particular mind developing. Who was inspiring you at that time, alongside David Hockney? That is, was it your parents, or was it who was inspiring?
Well,
you?
Yeah, my dad is a photographer. Right. So at 3, I got a camera. At 5, I was printing in the darkroom my own prints. So you go to exhibitions, you see work, and you copy things that you see, even at that age. Yeah. I see it now with my daughter of 5, drawing when she's in an exhibition, trying to redraw the paintings that she sees. So I guess it has always been that playfulness. And then that image of David Hockney, I just still remember being at roughly the age of 8, sitting on the floor, looking at this book in which there is this photograph, Pear Blossom Highway. Now, 20 years later, I read the biographies of David Hockney, and it just keeps inspiring me, the way he pictured his way of seeing. And I'm using similar techniques of moving around. We'll get to that probably in Earthly Windows, but I just end up with an entirely different image. Yeah. But the ways of seeing are profound.
What narrative are you looking for when you're researching a new study? What motivates you to make these? I mean, they are long tail projects.
Shall we start with quiet areas then?
Yeah.
Sacred grounds?
Yeah.
So I graduated. I was thinking of what can I make next, and I stumbled just upon this poster on quiet areas in the Netherlands, or in the area that I was living in. I was like, that might be nice to make an image of that. And just the idea of capturing silence was just triggering me. So how do you capture silence then? And that became this journey. How do I photograph silence, which is just the absence of sound? In many ways. And then just by walking through these areas, and in the Netherlands, there are quiet areas, are nature preserves where the sounds of the flora and the fauna needs to be the most dominant sounds, and all the human noises cannot be higher than 35 decibels. So it's like these rules that create these pockets of wilderness or silence in a way. And that triggered me to, how can I capture that silence? How can I make it so quiet in the image itself that you feel the silence? And that just took me along, I think, 80 of those areas that I just kept walking for a long time. And after a while, okay, I don't want people in there. But with my vision on landscape, I always need some traces of people in there.
I'd never heard of whole areas of a country that were designated quiet.
Well, the Netherlands is very small in comparison, of course, to the UK or to Germany. And so it's actually in the Netherlands, they were like, okay, let's make these areas. It needs to be silent just to protect the nature from the ever increasing expansion of traffic and industry. Right now, actually, there is this debate that they want to get rid of those areas because just to be able to increase industry and traffic again. Yeah. But they were actually brought to life to protect nature from humanity in a way.
And what's the process? Are people now lobbying to keep these areas? What's the security of them in the future looking like?
Well, a lot of areas are already protected within other regulations, but only a few have been removed in a way with that label.
It was interesting because when I first saw sacred places, I thought this has to be something about religion, but I suppose there's a religious connotation to our relationship with the quiet.
Yeah, I mean, going to these natural environments, very often on Sunday, it's very busy in the natural environment and the churches are running empty.
Yeah.
So that was one trigger. And at the same time, I think quietude and reflection call upon a kind of sacredness. And then giving it this title also made it more important in a way. And at the same time, I'm very aware that this is, again, a human construction.
As we record this conversation, we are in fact in the last few days of your show Earthly Windows, and it's showing at the Ruskin Museum, which is a great place for it to show at Coniston in the UK, a beautiful part of the Lake District. How did the show get received?
So far, very good. I get lots of compliments on it. There is some media coverage, which is nice, and
What are the Earthly Windows, and why the title?
Earthly Windows, it's a project I worked on for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
When I was working on the sacred grounds, I was like, okay, I can capture silence, but can I actually capture how I perceive the living environment in front of me, the space, basically? And then I got triggered by the works of Giambattista Tiepolo, which is a Baroque Italian painter, because he uses this contradictory perspective. Things that seem further away appear to be closer by. So that idea triggered me, because when I was walking in the landscape, when you're walking on a path and there is this town in the distance, very often the town doesn't seem that far away. But when I wanted to photograph that with my camera, whichever lens I would use, either the path is too wide and the village is too far away, or I photograph the town, but then you don't see the path anymore. So for whatever reason, I was thinking, okay, I could use this idea of contradictory perspective or multiple perspectives and then blend them together in the computer to create an image that's closer to my experience of landscape. But very often, I don't like the idea of using these techniques without having a really good purpose for it. So it took a while to figure out, okay, why would I be looking at a town in the distance? And then I came up with the idea of the history of the European landscape and how in different phases in time, humanity has experienced landscape in a different way. For this project, it was the medieval period, Renaissance, Industrial Revolution in the 20th century,
Right.
because they're all time periods in which this experience is probably changed. So then for the medieval period, I walked the Camino Primitivo to Santiago de Compostela.
Yeah, it's one of those trails that we've talked about a few times. It's I suppose it's for many people in Europe, the Photowalk, isn't it?
It probably is. I mean, books have been written about it. It's of course, it speaks to the mind. They invented this walk roughly in the year 900, 926, if I remember correctly. And then, of course, it was for Christianity to fight against the Moors and there is all these connotations to it, but it's also a beautiful walk. There are so many roads leading to Santiago, just as there are so many roads leading to Rome, and it's very well preserved. You can do it in different stages, and it's just a beautiful walk. And I walked then one of those walks. And then the Primitivo, which is the oldest route, it starts in Asturias, in the Asturian mountains in Oviedo in Spain. And it just goes straight through all the mountains. Yeah. It's probably one of the least walked routes along that Camino.
I know some people walk immense mileages. I was talking to somebody who'd walked from Germany.
That's amazing.
I know. So that's the first chapter, isn't it? That's the first chapter in this work. And what did you set out to photograph, to show?
So my idea was that the medieval period was characterized by enclosed spaces. Mm-hmm. And then I had this list of keywords that I wanted to focus on during the walk. So I had the path, because walking was the only mostly means of transport. Churches, especially because they capture also the eye in the distance. The idea of the afterlife in a way, or life was not just focused on the here and now, but also what would happen after people passed away. So focusing on cemeteries, things like that. Yeah. So all these things that would trigger contemplation.
Second chapter, you had to get your mountain walking shoes on, didn't you?
No, it's not too bad. It's just a long hike. For the second chapter, the Renaissance, I followed in the footsteps of Petrarch climbing the Mont Ventoux in France. And then I tried to figure out what road he would have walked. So there are these pathways up, but I think it's about a 6 to 8 hour hike up. Yeah. Or at least with my camera gear, it was roughly 6 to 8 hours. Probably closer to 6. And then when I started walking, I knew I wanted to photograph the view from that mountain. Yeah. Because as it has been told, Petrarch would have climbed that mountain just to enjoy the view.
Yeah, that's what surprised me. People didn't climb to enjoy views back in 1336.
No, they climbed to get to the other side, or to get the sheep to the other side of a mountain, but not necessarily to look into the world. So that's also the difference between the medieval period, where you have these enclosed spaces. People lived quite close to their towns and everything happened in that area. And then just climbing that mountain, you can see the Alps. You can almost see, or as he describes it, the Mediterranean. So you could look so far away, and your whole worldview would expand. And I could really see how that was happening, being able to go so high.
In those first two periods between chapter 1 and chapter 2, and perhaps both of them at this time, there were many people that felt that the world was flat. And of course, being up that high and seeing that vision, for many that was perhaps the first idea that the world wasn't as flat as they perhaps thought.
Probably. I don't have my timing exactly right. I think when Copernicus would have figured out that the world was round. Yeah. If I remember correctly, that's either 1372 or 1400 something. But yeah.
Chapter 3, when we knew the world wasn't flat, the Industrial Revolution, and that brought you to the Lake District. There were mills, there was huge strides for the railways. The British railway system was, I think, the leading system of its time. Huge steps of production in all kinds of materials. But you chose the mines to represent this particular chapter. And I don't immediately associate the mines with the Lake District.
Yeah, I learned in school that the Industrial Revolution started around Lancashire with the spinning jenny, I think.
Yeah, and that's right. Yeah,
all these inventions within the cotton industry, the wool industry, and then you had the coal mining for the steam engines, and then the railroad, which really changed the whole way of transport. But then just that idea of mining coal, just like we can, and then you had all these enclosures as well. So the whole landscape just changed in a way that you can really utilize the land.
Yeah.
That was my main trigger I wanted to photograph these places where the landscape has been utilized on such a big scale. And then I went to the Lake District because when researching, where can I find actually these remnants of mines? And then I found this huge concentration around the Lake District, and especially a huge variety. So I photographed an iron slag heap, former coal mines, a tungsten mine. Yes, it didn't exist, the idea of tungsten in the Industrial Revolution, but the copper mines, which were there before. There had been small coal mines, I think from the Roman era. Actually, already.
Well, I didn't realize the Romans were such miners.
No, but not on that scale. And that's the big difference with in the Industrial Revolution, that everything becomes so large that you get this scarring in the landscape. And I found these places then within the Lake District that were so immense that I wanted to portray it there.
Well, having seen your pictures from the Lake District, I don't know, maybe my eyes have been closed when I've gone to the Lake District. I spent a lot of time there in my youth, particularly with my mother and father who loved the area. But I just don't recall the scarring on the landscape that you've managed to capture. It is, the scale is enormous, isn't it?
Yeah, the scale is enormous. And then what I had said from the start, I started to do post-production in all these photographs. So I exaggerated sometimes the scale a bit of how big stones are or how I could see. So quite often you look towards a mine and you look on top of it. And I create these montages quite often of 20 photographs that expand by walking around. So I think the scale is huge and immense. Yeah. But once I would just take one photograph, that would not cut it in a way. I would just not be able to capture the scale how I would experience it. So maybe it's also different if you've been there, taken photographs, and then you see my photographs in which the scale appears to be totally different because I've been walking around and then taking the images. But yes, I could pinpoint you to every place. I'm actually heading there on Friday again. I'm revisiting also some of the mines that I photographed back then.
And Luc Van Vliet returns soon for part 2. So, this show and our community is fueled very much by you. Since launching, we're now at episode 384, by the way. Yeah, I can't believe it either. I'm trying to coincide the 400th. I'm going to have to do some extra episodes, I think, if my maths are correct, to enable us to do so. But I'm trying to make 400 the episode that's recorded and made in Scotland on our Inverness retreat. We've been an evolving show, haven't we? Started during the end of 2020's lockdown as a short daily show under a different title. To where we are today, it's changed quite significantly, really. It's now a weekly show, or twice weekly, of course, if you are a patron. Well, one thing's for sure, we've definitely become a show that I think in the photographic genre, no, not I think, I know, I know, be more positive, Neil, I will, no, is unlike any other podcast. And it's in no small way down to you with your thoughts and your letters and your exploring and your notes and your art. Well, you know. It wouldn't be where it is today. It wouldn't be the show that it is today without you, and particularly without our special extra milers who help to, with our sponsor, mpb.com, to fund what is quite a production during the week. So if you've been walking anywhere that you think we'd like to experience, any stories that you have, and we started with some cracking stories today, then please keep emailing me. To be that fuel, send your mails to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. If you're sending pictures, 2,500 pixels wide, please, whether it's portrait, landscape, square, whatever. And if you can't do that, don't worry, send them in anyway, and I'll do the heavy lifting to optimize them for the web page. Right, it being second Friday of the month, it's now officially Street Week. It's the feature roughly in the middle of the show. See, does what it says on the tin. Today, a friend of the show starts a new series once a month about making street work. Valerie Jardin, with the help of pictures on the show page today on this episode, we'll talk about the photographs, explain the photographs. If you get a chance to look at them while we're talking, fine. If you're driving, no, obviously. But actually, the way that it's described should be a workshop in itself. It's a workshop as well as a series. And whether you make street pictures or not, so I know there's going to be some great advice photographically in the months to come. So here is Valerie Jardin for Visual Stories number 1.
Valerie, it's the first of our features near the middle of the show, but we've kind of renamed yours Visual Stories because that's what they are, isn't it?
Yes.
We're going to be talking about your stories, the street pictures, how you, and most importantly, how you got there. It's very important that you reference this with the show page, although it'll be on social media as well, because you'll see the pictures that Valerie is talking about, but the lessons, the thoughts, the stories that you have, I'm sure the mind being very active and imaginative can probably piece the story together as well. So if you are driving at the moment while listening to this programme, do not take your eyes off the wheel or the road ahead of you. But do go reference the pictures when you get home. So where do we start? Well, I think we should start, Valerie. I'm very excited about this because this is the start of months and months to come. Last time we talked, you mentioned a picture, The Kiss on the Breakwater, which almost sounds like the title of a movie. But
yes, and actually a lot of people have told me that this picture could be part of a movie.
Yeah, now it's very romantic. I'll let you explain the picture, but there's a sub-story to this, which I think is lovely.
The picture may be romantic. The way I got there was definitely not.
No.
I wish actually there was a video of me getting that shot, but I'm quite proud of it. So the picture is actually, this is Normandy, Cabourg, for those of you who are familiar with Normandy. It's my other home. Oh. And it was actually the day before the start of a workshop, September. And it was a beautiful Saturday. Beach was packed with people. And a friend texts me, a friend who is not a photographer, and that's kind of an important part of the story. A friend texts me and said, hey, do you want to go for a walk? Grab my camera, run downstairs, and then we meet on the beach and we start walking. But of course, I have my camera, so I'm always scanning around me, kind of walking through beachgoers, I mean, people lying on the beach and everything. And all of a sudden, I'm always looking out, and I've taken photographs on the breakwater, especially when they're not completely empty, but when the tide is coming back or going out. So you still have the waves, and you have this platform right in the middle. And so from a distance, I see a couple on the breakwater. So right away, I tell my friend, I see a photo op. I'm sorry, but I really have to go. So I just literally kicked my flip-flops, left them behind, and I start running among all those beachgoers. And as I was running, keeping an eye on the prize, I did not see that some kids had dug a huge hole in the sand. And I felt right in it.
Was it big?
Well, it was quite big because, I mean, to me now, I remember it being much bigger than it was, I'm sure. But I fell both feet, and I remember holding my camera above my head to save the camera from the sand. And right away, you know how you do, if you do something that probably looks silly, you look around you and, you know, see if anybody saw me. Well, yeah, everybody saw me, and everybody was staring at me. But I had, again, my eye on the prize. I got out of the hole, and I kept on going. And I arrived on the breakwater just as the couple was kissing. And I got as close as I could. It seems like they're just alone, and it's like the end of the world. It's just them. And
it does. I mean, I wouldn't imagine behind them, and the scene you're describing had a beach full of people. It just looks like they are there on their own, in their moment. Nothing else is on the beach, or nothing else certainly matters apart from the mad photographer that's just fallen down a hole built by children. You haven't spooked them, which is quite interesting.
No, probably because by the time I got there, I slowed down. That's the thing. In the street photography, you can't be rushing. I rushed to get there, but with the crowd, you know, and they were quite busy. And by the time I got there, then I really slowed down. And then I pretend like I'm photographing seagulls and things that I'm getting closer and closer. And then just as I know I have the shot that I'm envisioning, then I compose and get the shot, and then I leave. I cropped it a little bit. I really couldn't get any closer. They would have definitely spotted me at this point. And I don't want to invade their moment. It was a special moment. I wanted to capture it, and I didn't want to disrupt it. And yes, so then I went back and met my friend, and the first thing she said, wow, I did not know that photography was such a dangerous sport.
It's the extreme sport of photography. Two things I want to ask you about the picture. Number one, the horizon. I always look at pictures and I think, right, has to have if it's the sea, for me, it has to be a straight horizon. I almost find myself twitching if it isn't. Is it the same story for you?
Oh yes, and I always have my horizon straight. Yeah. I never use one of those little bubble things on the camera.
Yeah.
I wish I had taken a lower angle, to be honest, where they would stand out more from the sky. Again, it was such a moment that I could have so easily missed.
Yeah.
But no, I had sore muscles the next day from the fall, but that was well worth it. It was one of my favorite pictures of the summer.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, what's that technique that magicians use when they want you to look somewhere else? Oh, what's it called? Not diversion. I bet both of us can't think of the expression.
Oh, yes. No, I know what you mean.
Oh,
I don't know
what's
how
it
you call
called?
that.
Well, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But I think that's what photographers do a lot here. And you've reminded me of that, because you said when you turned up at the scene, you were making out that you were photographing gulls and maybe other stuff, but you weren't photographing them. Is that a technique that you use quite often?
Oh, absolutely. You have to use some tricks. Like, if I get really, really close to people, it's like I pretend like I'm on my phone, and nobody notices people on their phone. Well, I'm actually, the camera is ready. It's right in front of me, and I don't bring it to my eye, but it's right at chest level or lower, depending on what I want to get. And I've literally bumped into my subject that way. That's how close you can get. So you have to use ways for people not to notice you. I mean, those are tricks to become invisible, which is really what the street photographer should be, is invisible, even though you can be within just a few inches from people.
Now, I like this one. It's titled Waiting. It's, in essence, a lady who is sat at a table on a chair in a shop. It looks to me like you've snuck this picture in many ways. You've walked past the door opening and you've seen this story happening in front of you. That's all I'll say about it. I'll let you fill in the gaps, because she's looking away. So classically, again, she's looking away, not necessarily at you. So there's some rules being broken here, aren't there? Straight away.
Mm-hmm. And to me, this one really, that's my definition of street photography. It's really that moment that most people would walk by, but if you stop and frame it, it's beautiful. And that's a story about old age. So that's actually just down my street in Paris. And I was just heading back home when I walked by this little shop. It's a little grocery store, but just organic stuff. So it's very small, very old fashioned. And I spotted her in the light. And so I walked by, because that's the thing too in street photography. You can't make a sudden stop, then people will look at you and then their shot is gone. So I kept on going, and then I got my settings right, went back, and then walked slowly, and then framed this, where I wanted to include the part of the door, part of the wall, to give the viewer a sense of what is happening. And so I grabbed the shot. And after I got the shot, then I looked in as if I was going to walk into the store. It's like, oh, what is this little shop? Just to know what was happening. And the story was actually, she was sitting while the owner of the shop was filling her basket with fruits and vegetables and stuff. So she was actually giving her grocery list as she was sitting there and waiting. And so quite like knowing the story. She wasn't just waiting for a friend who was shopping. She was actually giving her grocery list to the person working in the store. And it's a sweet moment. I love the light. I love her hands. Hands of elderly people have such stories, and they're so beautiful. And I like that she's not looking at me. That would have totally ruined the shot. So that to me is really pure street photography, the way I love it. I love those moments that most people would never pay attention. But then if you freeze that moment in time, there is a whole story behind it. And there's so much you can see from this. I mean, look how elegant she is. You know, she's got this
she's upright.
Nice. She's sitting nice and tall. She has this really nice sweater. And so she takes good care of herself. And she's, there's so much we can tell from just that one snapshot.
Now, I since speaking to you a few times now on this program, there are many things I've learned and gleaned from things that you've said. One of those things that has stayed with me is what you hinted at right at the start, walking past and then going back and walking again. And I think you've said to me in the past, you've even done 3 passes, possibly 4 if you've needed to. Maybe I'm going over the top now, but not being afraid to. So you go along, you pass the scene, you think, that's what I want. Walk on a bit, cross the road, come back, cross the road, and then retrace your steps. Then make your picture.
Yes, because again, if you make that sudden stop, people will notice you. I'm really close. I'm shooting at 23 millimeters, so I'm really close to people. And so when you're hunting on the street, you have to walk slowly, because if you react to a moment, you have to do it slowly for the same reason. But sometimes you walk by and you do a double take. It's like, oh, there was something special there. You can't just stop and grab the shot. You really have to keep going. Sometimes I even cross the street so that the person doesn't see me going by twice. I cross the street, and that's how we end up walking, 20 miles.
Another 20,000 steps to Valerie, please, for one frame.
There was a special moment. I really love this picture because it touches me. It touches my heart. And that's really what photography should do. It has that emotional metadata, I would say, that is so important, that's attached to every picture, that brings you back, that triggers an emotion. And hopefully people who view it will also react to it. They may not, but then when it comes down to it, that really doesn't matter. It's my picture and I'm the only person I really need to please with it, right?
Yes, I like that idea, that we as photographers make pictures for ourselves. And even though, yes, we do make them at times for an audience to share with others, share our experiences, tell people stories, it's important that the pictures that we make need to please us as well. And Valerie returns next month for Visual Stories 3. Hang on, Neil, you can't count. 1 to 3. For our extra milers. Visual Stories 2 you will get next week on the midweek extra mile edition. So we sort of hoppity hop along the way. And Valerie's going to be with us for however long. When we had our discussion, it was kind of, well, let's just do it until we don't do it as a feature. And it's always an absolute joy to talk with Valerie. I very much enjoy our conversations. And I have a sneaky feeling, Valerie, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but that I'm going to be going on one of your amazing street workshops that you do across Europe. There we go. Another Pinstriped Express, pups, on the way to Pinstripesville. So yeah, that's you didn't mind me mentioning that, did you, Valerie? It'll make an amazing episode, I know it will. I want to tip my summertime cap to the Extra Milers, our special community of friends, which I mentioned just a moment ago, because you're so important in keeping this show rolling. Once a month we have a live Zoom show, and every week the stars of the Extra Mile, the extra Photowalk show that you hear, I like to go, see, you go the extra mile for me, so I go the extra mile for you. The stars of the show are you, with your stories. It's fantastic to meet those who listen to the show. And that's what we do with the Extra Mile. We've uncovered some incredible stories, so we have. Now, last week I went photo walking with a friend of mine, a friend of the show, an Extra Miler, Matt Delinsky, and we talked about his battles, if you will, with mental health, and how photography has been a catharsis, something that has helped in his healing. As we walked through Oxford, we talked, and I played back our conversation on the Extra Mile. I thought you might be interested to hear just a couple of moments from that show.
On this week's Extra Mile.
It's an obvious thing, you know. People, when things are going your way, you're always going to feel like you're on top of the world, and you know your bills are paid, and you got your friends and family around you. Everyone's going to feel good when that happens. But my point is, you know, what kind of person are you going to be if you hit rock bottom?
What do you do on those days?
I use my experience of what I've gone through for the better. You know, I know for a fact that I don't want to look back and go down that road that I did before. It's like I said to you before.
But what actual things do you do? What? So it sort of almost sound like I'm pushing you on this, but are there?
I do my photography.
There's photography, right?
I do my photography.
Writing, or?
I write my thoughts on pieces of paper,
Good, right,
like these notes. These notes aren't just for today. These notes is you know, I've got a handful of notes at home that I keep next to me while I'm working. Yeah. You know, Monday to Friday. It's little reminders. You know, I listen to motivational videos. I listen to speakers. Yeah.
Who do you listen to? Can you recall any?
Eric Thomas.
Eric Thomas?
Yeah, he's my favourite. One of the quotes that I heard probably about 7-8 years ago has always stuck to me. Don't cry to give up, cry to keep going. Don't cry to quit. Right. You're already in pain, you're already hurting. Get a reward from it. And I think of that quote nearly every single day.
Do you?
Yeah. Bush.
I'm watching what you're not seeing, but what I'm seeing is I saw a big branch, a big thing coming towards us both, and I thought Matt's going to hit that, and he hit it. So just at a moment where you're trying to be serious and gather thoughts.
Oh, you can't. You got to have some fun.
I'm pushing you into the nettles and walking you into trees. Yeah. This is a lovely walk here. Do you do much walking now? Because when I first met you, when you were out there with your camera taking a picture of Mr. Robin that I'm now feeding, as you know, do you? I'm taking care of him now. Do you get out and walk as well?
Not as much as I used to. I'll be honest there, but that's because I'm doing other things. So it's not because I don't want to, it's purely because I'm busy doing other things now.
Come on then, give me your notepad. Let's see. I'm not sure that we've covered everything. It's interesting, isn't it, that these notes, I didn't realise, I thought these notes were the notes for today, but I didn't realise they're actually notes that you just keep by your side.
At my computer screen, I used to have sticky notes. You know, the yellow sticky notes?
Yep.
Covering the whole thing. So every time, most of the day I'm looking at my monitor. So I would have all these sticky notes everywhere, just reminding me, gentle reminders. Again, goes back to my videos. My videos aren't to shove it into people's faces. It's purely just gentle reminders. I put up a video the other day saying the person staring at you in the mirror can be your worst enemy. Because I think we do put ourselves down too much. We do listen to that little whisper in our head saying, no, you can't do that. You're not good enough to do that or whatever. I keep going back to it, but I gotta say, that's where you gotta change your mindset on things. Because your mind is just a constant battleground, isn't it? I grew up for so many years, people trying to beat me down or whatever, mentally. This is why, if someone tells me, this is where our mindsets are a little bit different, I think. Because, if someone tells me that I can't do something, fine, I'm going to prove you wrong.
The voice of Matt Dolinsky. And I shall leave a link to Matt Dolinsky's Instagram feed. He's been doing some live link-ups of late, talking about mental health and photography. You might be interested to follow some of those and watch some of those, and perhaps reach out and talk with Matt as well. So I'll leave a link on the show page today. This week's Extra Mile is out, as I said, and you can listen to it by clicking on the support the show icon on the front of the website for photowalk.show. If you're not a member, the latest shows now have 5-minute previews. They tend to be my introduction mainly, but this week I made sure to include a bit more of Matt Dolinsky's conversation. I think there's 8 minutes or so, give or take, as a preview. I'm very proud, that the chats that we have on this show and are about you, and it's fantastic to meet you. You are the stars, and while I have your ears, Africa 24 is still open for bookings and probably will be for a few months. We're off together for, I say an adventure, stroke holiday, stroke retreat, stroke expedition, stroke once in a lifetime chance to meet people that I think will be entirely inspiring to you, all in one exciting adventure to the smiling coast of Africa, the Gambia, where we'll be spending time with the people of this wonderful small country on the west coast. There's river trips, we'll be going to markets, wildlife to see villages, music, dancing to photograph. We'll be experiencing the food of the region. Just the list goes on and on and on, including making a podcast. Yes, we'll be making a podcast together, learning about putting sound and pictures together. So go to the link on the show page and also on the menu at photowalk.show. 4 places have been confirmed. There are 6 remaining, although I think we're on the cusp of a 5th, and over the next couple of months, hopefully I'll be reporting back saying, right, we've got our expedition team, and the planning really then does begin. I've been highlighting one day from each of the 10 as a teaser, and I'm going to continue doing that this week. We'll find out about one of the days from the expedition, but to do so, I need to cross back to my studio self.
On the second Wednesday of our time together in Africa, in the Gambia, we'll be on the river part of our adventure. Departing our eco-lodge early, we're bound for a fishing village called Tangi, where the men return from overnight Atlantic fishing in traditional colourful pirogues. Amazing to photograph. They're greeted by the women of the village, who swim to the boats often to collect the catch. It's a photographic wonder and a documentary of life. And in the afternoon, we'll journey together to Sanyang, a beautiful beach where we'll witness wrestling. And you have time to unwind along this expansive stretch of coast, where it's not unknown to be joined by the area's local cattle. In the evening, we'll be piecing our adventure podcast episode together, drawing from the sights and the sounds that we've recorded, because that's one of the features, as I say, of our time together. You and I are making a podcast. And hopefully you'll leave West Africa understanding how to make your own audio stories. Africa 24 is waiting for you.
I've run various retreats now in the UK, although there's a European one starting to hint now, coming up next year. The African one at the start of the year. This is unlike any that we've organised on this particular podcast, although I've been involved in things like this in the past. I'm so looking forward to it. Honestly, I can't tell you. Having been there a good few times, for me it's such a wonderful, magical place with just the most charming people, friendly, outgoing, and the experience I'm just so looking forward to being with you on that experience if you're one of the ones that signed up so far. Right, the winner chicken dinner, isn't that what they say, pups? The winner, chicken dinner? Did you just say chicken? Oh, I shouldn't have done that. The winner of the Portrait Challenge. We have a new assignment for the month of June, which is now on the website. If you would like to take part, go take a look. It's set by Scott Chathenio. It's essentially an invite to make a hero image of a thing, something that's precious to you. I've made one so far, possibly two. I did a second one the other day that I'm not so sure I'm happy with yet. So it's a hero image. However you make the picture, Scott's work is it's got that pop art look, hasn't it? So you might decide to do something that's quite stylised, such as Scott has done with his work. I don't know. It could be under lighting conditions. It might be natural light. I don't know. The photographic world. Pardon you. Did you hear that? Trains today. The photographic world is your oyster. Right, the famous, not so famous flask. We need to award one for the winner. I say winner loosely because everybody's a winner. Oh, Neil, don't start that. Don't start doing that. No, but I do mean that it's the entries that we've got. They're all fantastic and all have their own merits. But I do choose one that particularly catches my eye. And the famous, not so famous flask for last month's assignment goes to, drum roll please, John Kenny. If it is permitted for the May Challenge, says John, I attach photographs of Dag Kadal. I hope I'm saying that name correctly. I met on a cold afternoon in February. Dag was sitting on a bench featured, wearing the deerstalker hat and sharing coffee with his dog. Sounds perfect. Initially, I asked permission to include him in my photograph of the Abbey before we had a chat. I actually wrote the conversation down in a notebook when I got back to the car. You can read the rest on the assignments page from that meeting with Dag, who ended up photographing. Cracking picture, and I'll be sending the flask to you. Right, letters. Here is one from Swedenland, not so far away. Hello, Neil, and thanks for the great pod. No, thank you, Gustav Janssen, for being there and listening. Such is the joy of receiving letters and pictures from all over this globe. It's a long time since I last went to Swedenland in person, but I think you're just about to take me there in pictures. You recommend, says Gustav, listening while you're out taking photos, where you as the host can join us as listeners without caring about time and space, photographing together along the path. Gustav, if that's the way that it comes across, it's music to my slightly burned ears from the weekend. Note to self, more factor 50 this weekend when I'm working in Suffolk. It's going to be a scorchio weekend in the UK anyway. To be honest, I've never actually listened to the podcast, says Gustav, while actually taking a walk with my camera. That is until Thursday of last week. I had some spare time and I took my car not far from home, but still to a totally unexplored area for me. Sunset, check. Photowalk podcast in my ears, check. Charge batteries, check. SD card in the SD card slot, check. I promised myself one thing that day, and that was not to press the preview button to check composition, light, or anything. Just point my Leica M10, oh you lucky man you, and go with my feelings. It turned out pretty well. And I just want to share 10 photographs from that walk. Most of them are taken on a hike called, and I hope I'm going to get this right, Gotteleden. Gotteleden? I watched a couple of films and the pronunciation was going past so quickly, it was tricky for me to keep up with it, but I think that's the correct expression. I'm sure you'll correct me if not. It reaches from Gothenburg to a smaller town in Sweden called Alingsås. That hike is about 70 to 80 kilometers in length, and I walked just a very small part of it, but gosh, it's beautiful. Hang about, are we allowed to say gosh? I thought we'd outlaw gosh. Or at least it's a word we use between ourselves when the TikTok generation aren't listening. It's so beautiful, the New York Times has marked it as one of the top places to walk. Unfortunately, they marked it as one of the top places to walk in 2020. So I guess we didn't get that many American tourists from that particular shout-out at that moment. But I don't think any one of these photographs, he says, reaches my portfolio of top Swedish nature photos. But that walk gave me some motivation and spark to shoot random things without any meaning. And listening to you and Ave Pildus and his Hollywood adventure just made the walk so much more enjoyable. Note to self, leave a link for that particular episode on the show page today. I hope to talk to Ave again. After all those decades of photographing people, there are more stories yet to tell, I'm sure. Thanks again from Sweden's pre-summer. And thank you, Gustav. I am awarding you the right to say gosh whenever you feel like it. As for the idea of photographing just because, well, I did do that last week, as I was saying, in Oxford with my friend Matt Delinsky, as you heard. No agenda, just making pictures, just being together, just because, just enjoying the quiet time. I think we get the idea, Neil. I love that trail, by the way, the look of the trail. It does look just fantastic. I am, and I honestly mean this, it's not one of those, I'm making a list and then I don't really make a list. I am noting down places in the world that I would dearly like to take the Photowalk, because I never know where this is going to end up. That's probably, I know I do talk about my extra milers, and I know I do talk about supporting the show, but building a community and all that kind of stuff is well, that's what I'm planning to do. And your trail, I'm going to call it your trail, Gustav. It's Gustav's trail from now on, is on that list of places I would love to take you, Gustav, that is, and you, and my other listener. I don't mind them coming along as well, to that wonderful walk. I'll leave a link to your work as well, Gustav, because I'd like you to go and see the work that he does. This way. Come on, this way. Puppy, Sir Barkalot, look at you. If I could hold the treat tin, the microphone, I've got the clipboard with letters between my legs. If I could hold the camera now as well, I need far more hands. I'd take a picture of your face. Look at him. Oh, I've been walking for ages. How many calories have we burned? It must be time for a treat. We had a disaster not so long ago. About half an hour ago, I dropped the treat tin. Treats went absolutely everywhere. He was straight in. Boof. Didn't give me a chance to pick them all up. Yes, the treat tin is sounding rather bare. I am aware, though, I've not been making too many photographs along the trail, so let me get one of my sketchbooks. I've made so many pictures of this canal. Sometimes I think, what can I show you that's new? Walk somewhere new, Neil. I know, but this is a really good recording trail for me. Just the right amount of nature sounds, not too close to any major motorways, which are horrible. That's one of the reasons I came away from Englefield this morning. I was, it's a place you might not know, but just so you know, it's very close to the M4 motorway that travels east-west, west-east in England land. And it's just, all I could hear was woo, and it was really uninspiring. Englefield is a house owned by the Benyons. We found Barney's. Let me get a picture here. Actually, he's going to be on the end of a lead, and when I take pictures of him, I'll come back to who owns Englefield in a moment. I try to get them when he's not on a lead, but hold on, Barney. There we go. Look like you're enjoying yourself. Those portraits you see on websites all the time of dogs bounding through the water. Well, I don't think so. It's a bit hot. I'll just drink. Okay, fair dues. Yes, Englefield is owned by a family. Well, Richard Benyon was the Member of Parliament MP for many years here. It's a huge house, massive estate. I feel like I need to wear tweed just to walk across the paths where you're allowed to walk there. Anyway, he lives right next door to the M4. It's just a bit of it's a constant rumble, constant noise pollution, he says, as you can hear lightly in the background the sound of an ambulance. Right, Facebook. We haven't talked about our Facebook group for so long, and they're a fantastic group. I'm visiting more often now. And it's great to see the work that you're doing. And I will start to include some of the from our Facebook group. We have a page in a group. I'll include some of the work that I see, because there are some super stories that you're leaving in there as well. They're gold. There's gold in them, their Facebook hills. And I should really be featuring it a bit more. If you'd like to join our Facebook group, please do. Great friendly community in there. Nobody trying to better each other on tech head stuff. It's all about the experience. Well, mostly it's about the experience. So head over to Facebook, and if you'd like to send in some pictures, some of the stories from where you've been walking, I'd love to hear from you, so I can include you as a story in the coming months. Send your stories to stories. See, it does exactly what it says on the tin. Stories at Photowalk.show. If you're sending pictures, if you can resize them to 2,500 pixels wide, that makes everything a bit neater when it comes to the admin of the show and when we upload them to the show page. And I'm going to start using some of them on the Instagram page as well, because it's nice to share in the community that we're starting to build there as well. Right, here is one from Stan Crook. This letter has been maturing in my inbox like a Sardinian pecorino sardo. It actually follows an Extra Mile episode, but you sent it here to the Friday Photo Walk, so I'm going to read it here. Morning, Neil. I hope this message finds you well. It does today. The sun is out. We're just taking a walk. It's a light saunter, which in comparison to the walk that you'll be hearing on the show next week will be entirely different. Because, yes, next week's show comes from beautiful Snowdonia, right up the north of the national park, pretty much into the island at the top called Anglesey. Walking with Andy Fisher, who's going to talk about photography. No doubt we'll talk a bit about mental health. We'll talk about survival skills. I think it's going to be a really interesting program. It's a walk and talk show next week for the Photo Walk. We'll certainly have lots of pictures to share with you, that's for sure. But today, Stan, I'm just maybe I'm making up for it. It's definitely a light saunter as a pace. I was listening to the latest Extra Mile, number 23 in bed, headphones on, my idea of reading in bed, when my name popped up, re-episode Snore It Like Beckham. In particular, you were talking about and to Darren Hayton and his postcards and his pamphlets. Oh yeah, I remember that. Yes, that was the Extra Mile where we shared some super ideas in terms of printing your work for others to find. Yeah, just find. Such as it's beautiful. Can you hear that? Oh, what's that one, pups? We've been learning bird calls, haven't we? I'm sure that one is very simple. I should know that one. Andrew Hardacre, he'll write in and tell me. Oh, that was the lesser spotted something or other. That was the extra mile. Sorry, coming... I'm sauntering so much, I'm digressing. Quick, stick with it. Yes, it was the idea of printing your work for others to find, such as a book of your work that you then leave in a bookshop, which confuses everyone like mad when somebody takes that book to the counter. I'd like to buy this one. Oh, I don't recognise that one. It doesn't have a price on it. There's not even a barcode or an ISBN or a... See what I mean? And we had a story, and I think we might have discussed it even on that particular episode, of somebody leaving a book inside was it Heathrow? It was an airport bookshop anyway, which led to all sorts of extraordinary opportunities when somebody important picked the book up and decided they wanted to take it with them on a flight. As I mentioned, says Stan, I thought the idea was brilliant, so I decided to give it a go, and had a pretty decent response, including from nowhere a message from a small gallery in Blackpool asking if I would like to put on an exhibition. Well, to say never before has my flabber been as garsted, so to speak. I've attached a copy of the trifold pamphlet that I produced hastily, or better still, threw together as a trial while it was still fresh in my mind. Had it not been for the Photowalk, it might never have happened. And I also found a new friend, Alice Wasserberger, who put me onto the show while photographing around Manchester. Please continue with the great... I might have to hide behind a sofa now. This sounds like flattery coming up. Whoop, whoop, warning, flattery. Please continue with the good, great work. Incidentally, another idea from the show, I'd already started this project, was the Hands Project. I was out with my youngest granddaughter and I looked down and saw her hand in mine and I thought, I've got to grab this shot. And so it continued and will continue. I'll update you as time goes on. There are so many inspirations coming from the show that I'm addicted. I've shared links to the show on many photography groups on Facebook and also to my photography friends. It was you, was it? I thought it was you. Thank you so much. P.S. I've also attached a pic of Fearless, the dog, who's waiting patiently for her second walk. Regards, Stan. Yeah, I can see she's looking more patient than the picture I took a couple of minutes ago of Sabarkalot. It's getting very warm though, Stan. So, pups, what do you think? Should we head back? It's heading back home time soon, isn't it? I can see you're looking a bit tired. We've been out for quite a while, and the heat is now coming up. Come on, pups, keep going. I'm going. Right. Part 2 of my chat this week with my guest, Luc Van Vliet. In this half, we're going to talk about a book design that is, in all honesty, unlike any that I've seen. Luc Van Vliet is back to talk about earthly windows now. I reflect upon the way we treat our planet that has become a very different kind of relationship in this part as well. So here's the continuation of my conversation with Luc Van Vliet.
From your notes, humanity began to wander the earth in search of natural resources, and in doing so, came to see the landscape as something to be utilised. There seems to be a step change in our relationship that you can see through your project with our planet. We stop working the land or celebrating the land, and we start to devour it. That's what it seems to me. We start to pillage it, to scar it, as you've said.
I think the scarring, or at least that's the word, how I see it, how you really see what has been done to the land, but we really started using it. It's not enough anymore just to enjoy the view in a way. It's like, okay, how can I actually exploit it? And I think we're still seeing the remnants or the consequences of that today with the climate change.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to get to the final chapter yet, but I wonder if there was a fifth chapter that would probably be it, wouldn't it? But we'll come back to that in a moment. The final chapter in this, the fourth chapter, is the Autobahn. I love the way your mind thinks, because I think if I was sat down thinking of 4 chapters, I'm not sure the Autobahn would have come anywhere close to my thinking for that last chapter. And I'm fascinated by your creative thinking here. Why the famous Autobahns of Germany and the change of... And it's a change of photographic style as well, because here you start to employ things like multiple exposures, and there's much motion in your work as well.
Why what was triggered with the Autobahn, I don't entirely remember. I read a lot about landscape and experience of landscape, and I think in one of the books they said with the invention of the Autobahn that you get this centrifugal experience of space,
right?
In which you there is no center point anymore, which I thought that's like really the opposite of the medieval period. So you have a core center living around, and then there is this place where there is no center at all anymore. You're only living from place to place, but there is no place of being home. And then there is this beautiful book, Immortality, by Milan Kundera, and he describes the difference between walking and driving, or between paths and roads, something like that. And there he said, well, with roads, it only matters city 1, city B, but the whole space in between doesn't matter anymore. But while you're walking on paths, every moment counts in a way.
Yeah, I investigated that a bit in my mind as I was looking at your photographs, thinking, well, I'm not sure that's my experience, because I'm thinking of, well, perhaps not so much the Autobahns, but I'm thinking of the, what are they called in France? They're called the autoroutes, I think, in France.
Route de Soleil.
Yeah, where you see these it's unlike any I don't think it's like the motorway system in the UK, where it's expansive, where you do look across the lands and you are enveloped by the view, and because they're so blooming long, you've got time to look at them as well. And it wasn't necessarily my experience.
I think with the Autobahn, what happens, or with the highways, the whole highway system, is that you have the guardrail, so you can look at the landscape, but you cannot really enter it. Yeah. And at the same time, you can drive really fast, of course, on the Autobahn. So I'm driving there 130, 150 kilometers an hour, and you can see the landscape, but once you've passed it in a way, after hours of driving, there is not one image that sticks to my mind, but it's this stack of impressions that create this new landscape in a way. And that's how I try to photograph it. Basically, from one exit to the next exit, I would make multiple exposures to capture that. To be honest, that was actually the hardest chapter to photograph, because I had no clue how to do it. I started in the same manner as I did the road to Santiago. And then I photographed like, it doesn't really work. This doesn't trigger the experience of driving on the Autobahn. This is the Autobahn photograph, but it's not that experience of how I see it when driving for hours on end. And then after a while, I went a couple times and it didn't work. And I had these photographs at home. I was like, maybe if I stack them on top of each other afterwards. Yeah. So I had these 20 photographs, put them on top of each other. And that triggered me with, that's really nice. But I remember this technique of double exposures. Let's see if I can apply this here, but maybe not with just one double exposure, but let's do 10 exposures.
Yeah.
And see what will happen. And that was just like, okay, this is how I experience this, at the same time speed. But if you really take a long time to look at these individual photographs, everything is in perfect focus. You could technically see every detail of that landscape. And at the same time, you don't see it because it gets all these layers on top of each other.
So it's not ICM, it's not motion, it's everything's in detail, in focus. Yet I was reading it as some kind of motion blurred event. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. But if you would look at the prints, there everything is in perfect focus here, because it with this technique, it gave me the opportunity to work with, let's say, an 8,000th of a second. So then you can really drive at, let's say, 130 kilometers and still get everything in focus. Yeah. And that wasn't the case if I would stack it in Photoshop afterwards. That was a different experience. So
I drove the Autobahn route only a couple of months ago. My wife told me to slow down, so I saw it a lot slower than you saw it. You wouldn't have needed 1/8,000th with my speed.
I of course I didn't drive while taking the photograph.
I appreciate that. No, I didn't. I didn't think you would. Come on then, this fifth chapter. I know there isn't a fifth chapter, but had there been one, what would that look like? How our relationship with the land and the landscape may change again. Certainly, I mean, you mentioned the environmental changes. That would. I wonder where you'd go for a fifth chapter.
I've tried a fifth chapter,
and
I've chosen not to incorporate it. But I think that, and especially now after the pandemic, I still think that it would be traveling through your computer. So basically, the Google Earth, Google Street View, things like that you can sit behind your computer and go away wherever you want. You could basically go into orbit and still see everything, and you're just sitting still. It's an entirely different relationship again. How I would photograph that though, or how I would create images out of it, I don't know. I tried it. I tried a couple methods, and it wasn't to my satisfaction. And then I realized we're still in this shift of a different experience. And then that was roughly around 2017 that I was working on it. So a couple of years before the pandemic. And I think now with all these meetings online, as we're doing actually now, it becomes this entirely different experience. And now we're going, of course, into VR and all these ways that it becomes more real.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but I'm reminded of a photographic project. Oh, and I can't remember the name of the photographer. I will note to self, try and look this up, of the pictures that he made of his screen of CCTV camera views. And I wonder whether that was his pandemic project, actually. It might well have been. I'm reminded of that as we're talking.
I'm also thinking of a project that I later saw that somebody made of Google Street View photographs. It just doesn't bring to mind as well.
No. It's available as a book now. It's a rather special edition, this, because it opens up in a truly unique fashion. I would try to explain the concertina motion of how you travel through the book, but I'm sure you'll do it much better than I.
Well, it's a harmonic cover, which you rarely or never see in books. So it's like a harmonic that you could play.
The bellows as you pull it out.
Yes. Yeah. So and that's also, it gives the ability to basically stretch time and condense it in a way. Yeah. And then in every bellow, there is a part of a chapter of the photographs. And then I went on an artist in residence and I had all these photographs and I wanted to make a book out of it. So I started playing with every chapter and I made entirely different books. Then I went to a book designer, Peter Jonker, and I asked him, I really would like to get everything like this in just one book.
Yeah.
So the first idea was, let's make a box and fill it with 4 books. It's like, no, I want it in one book. So, and that took a long while to figure out a way to get all these different sizes in images. Because for the that view from the Mont Ventoux, this is like this panorama that you would fold out. It's a 360-degree panorama of a big mountain. I think the width is, if you print it only 15 centimeters high, it's already 6 meters wide. So how do you fit that within a book? So that's, for example, 4 fold-outs of just 1 meter width when you would fold out the book. While the book itself is only 20 centimeters in width. So you could keep on folding it out. And you can, with the harmonic cover, you can just lay out the entire book and have every chapter different page sizes and being able to do fold outs.
Does that mean that the whole book doesn't necessarily have a spine as such? It doesn't have a central spine. The whole thing could fold out. The
whole thing can fold out, and then there are basically 12 spines.
Oh, right. Okay. So
and the harmonic cover brings it all together.
Ah, right. Now I understand it. How interesting. What an incredible design. You must have been delighted with that.
Yes, I really love it.
Yeah,
it's really beautiful. And I think it's the only way to really show all these different chapters.
I don't think I've ever seen a book in that design before.
I can imagine. It's also very expensive to make, to do the book binding. Yeah. They had to do it by hand. I think every book goes by hand under the stitching machine for 12 times.
Wow.
So
mist features. It seems to me that mist features a lot in your work. Is that a way of you embrace? I don't know whether you're aware of it. Mist and fog, and is that a way of you portraying the quietness of the world that you so enjoy?
Well, I really enjoy walking in the mist.
Yeah.
It gives this silence also when walking around.
Well,
Everything becomes more quiet, and I guess it gives me the opportunity to think better, and I guess also then to look better.
Well, you're one of those photographers where I can, this might sound a bit woo-woo, but I can actually hear the silence. And I do believe you can do that in a photograph.
Well, thank you. That's really nice. And what I've realized is that I myself become very often a walker in the landscape, and that gives me the opportunity to portray the landscape with the speed of walking.
Yeah.
Which of course is opposite than to the Autobahn, but all the other things, I just get every time I get the time to look and to figure out, okay, what am I actually looking at? And then I really enjoy that for me, it's just a way of seeing in a way.
It's interesting that you talked in a video about the flaw of photography, in that it binds you to one single moment when life is perhaps a bit more fluid. But I think it's that very essence of giving somebody a chance to find meaning in a picture. I was told by one particular photographer that a still image gives you a chance to make it into a moving image in your mind. And I've always thought of that, and I've thought, what a great concept that is, that a still picture is still really magical, and it's a reason why it's not yielded to movies. I don't know if you've ever heard of the song Video Killed the Radio Star. In the same way that video didn't kill the radio star, I don't think movies have ever killed the still image, have they?
No, and just like photography did not kill painting.
No, absolutely, yeah.
For me, what I find wonderful about photography is, and especially in the way that I work these days, that I always create these montages to get closer to my experience of the reality of it. Everybody just experience it right away as a real perceived reality, even though all the images are constructed. So with photography, you always get this sense this is a real perceived moment in time. It might be changing because of everything that is these days possible, also with AI, of course, but what is still real. But I think with the photographic image, we still get this sense this is something that is happening in front of the camera. We'll see how that will change in the future,
well,
if that actually changes.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned AI, because I thought, well, with your long-term projects, maybe that's something you're going to investigate?
Maybe. Not yet. You were just mentioning that one photograph. So quite recently, I took a new photograph of the mill at Wijk bij Duurstede in the Netherlands. And that's this famous painting of Jacob of Ruisdael. And I went to that same place, and I created this one image of the river where there is still a similar mill like that, and you can see the town. But I also photographed the crossing of a canal that had been dug by the people, and then sluices and all these inventions. And I created that into one image in which you get the sense that you can walk around it. But it's comprised of roughly 80 images.
Wow.
And then people say, did you use AI to construct it? And I'm like, maybe a little bit in the technique to combine images, but most of it, I say, I do it by hand, but because I cannot say it needs to look like this and you would get this outcome if you say do it automatically.
Yeah.
It just cannot create that image that I have in my mind as a compressed version of reality, because I leave things out because I did not see them being there or walking around there, or I need to cut parts of the landscape to actually let it make more sense. And I think that thinking of what do you leave out and what do you need to put at that specific place is still a creative act. And currently I've been looking into this concept of reading the landscape as a palimpsest. A palimpsest is an old parchment in which previous writings have been erased and then new writings have been added to it again. But those old writings are still visible in a way, or barely visible, or legible at least. So this whole sense of a legible landscape, I'm exploring that now in new works, and how I will photograph that, I don't know yet exactly.
You also teach now. What is somebody who specializes in long-term projects? What do you talk to your students about?
I'm teaching now already for a decade. I've just been teaching my 10th year already to students. And basically, in short, I'm teaching them Photoshop, and then especially the relationship from going to a digital image to a print.
Yeah.
And how to work with the images. And that, in essence, is always about looking again. What do you see in the image? How does that come across? How does the photograph communicate? And I think that is as important for social media as it is for long-term projects. How do you look at your own images? How do you want your viewers to look at your images? And how can you guide that viewer? And I think those questions remain relevant, however you do it. If it is in a certain presentation in a book, in my book, that you can get fold-outs to let people envelop into the landscape in more long-term, or that you do that in some kind of fancy slideshow. For one of the examples I very often use is Apex from Arthur Jaffa, which is a very upbeat, very quick, with a lot of images. But it's also there. It is about looking at how one image relates to the following image. So it could be about high speed or low speed, but it's still about communication. What do you bring across?
I'm certainly going to ask a thinker, and you are one of those in the photographic world, about their why. It's my favourite punctuation mark at the end of conversations. So look, what is your why?
Oof. That's probably also the hardest question to ask. Sometimes I even don't know why I actually started with a project, but I'm just keeping on being fascinated with it, and I just want to delve deeper into it. But I think for me the most important thing is then how do I look into the world, or how can I let other people share in different ways of seeing the world from multiple perspectives, and that the world is basically very much a gray area, that you can, it's not as black and white as it is very often suggested. And how can you look at everything from a different angle? And that just keeps on triggering me to look into the world and seeing if I can show that or bring that across through my images.
I just had to ask a question. The why question had to be posed to Luc, and my thanks to him, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. I'll be leaving links, of course, to his work, his website, the book that we talked about, the most unique design of book I've witnessed, just simply stunning. Today's show page, episode 384, is now live on our website, photowalk.show. It has lots of links and films to and about the stuff of life and photography that we've discussed on the walk today. Just go direct to the website, photowalk.show, nice and simple, or there is a link on your podcast player app, just there. No, on your app you have to scroll up bit further. Keep going. There it is. There. Yeah, that's the one. Click that. Boom. See? Straight through to the website. That's magic, that is, Neil. And when you visit the page, I'm going to ask you a favour. Please, could you take a moment to share the show? Now, this has been made so much easier than last week when I was saying copy paste this. I've put a bit there, and I've also put a line to the show. And I know some of you were saying, and Neil of Ford, our IT guru, he really does float about 1 foot up, legs crossed, solving all of life's IT problems. He has said, it sounds a bit complicated, doesn't it? And he was absolutely right. And he went off and found a much better solution, which you will now find on the show page. There are buttons that you can click, which if you're logged into one of your social profiles, like a Twitter or a Facebook, automatically opens up a page to share the episode. Neil, that has been around since, the Vikings sailed up the rivers into York. Well, I didn't know that. And there's actually one button, which is just generally called share, that opens up social channels I didn't even know existed. So the main ones are there: WhatsApp, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. And if you write just a little bit about why you enjoyed the show, just a couple of words, and then it shares automatically. Look at that. Bong, done. If you wouldn't mind doing that today, that would be so helpful of you, and really does help the community to build. and make it a community rather than a best-kept secret. The Extra Mile is out now. Look forward to walking some more with you. And thank you to our volunteers who do help behind the scenes, such as Neil Ford, Andrea Gilpin, Emily Renier, and, of course, Kelly Mitchell, helping us, volunteering, I might add, and helping us with our social channels. Thank you so much. Swapping things around this week, we've been tweaking a little bit of late. The PS now will be our closing words or thoughts, along with a final picture on the show. And it's going to follow our play-out song, which today features the wonderful voice of Marl Thompson, and the title is Like a Song. And the reason for this particular tune today, this week we lost a great singer, Astrid Gilberto, who passed aged 83. She had a voice described as being that of an angel. This incredible, it's kind of a breathy, sassy voice that was, it was instantly her. And Bossa Nova, as is said by many of the reporters following her passing, owes a great debt of gratitude in terms of popularising the genre to a greater world. I remember the song, The Girl from Ipanema in particular, as being that song Mum and Dad had on one of their records as I was growing up. It was in a part of the collection alongside Elton John and the Carpenters, the bit that I was most certainly not allowed to touch. Don't touch! Get off my land! Astrid made that song hers. There's a whole history behind the writing and the casting of the song, The Girl from Ipanema, and it went on to become, I didn't realise this, the second most recorded popular song in history, behind Yesterday. Sinatra even covered it. And I'm sorry, but, cover your ears, Sinatra fans, if you don't like to hear somebody suggest the following, that I don't think that he did the song that much justice. It was not my favourite Sinatra. But anyway, Sunday mornings, we'd play records. Quick, rescue yourself, Neil. Because frankly, when I was growing up, television wasn't very inspiring of a Sunday morning. Besides, in the 70s, we were all told if you watch more than 35 minutes of telly a day or something, your eyes would turn square. So often this song, The Girl from Ipanema, that song, was, I suppose, like the anthem to a lazy Sunday from my youth. Now, the rather archaic licensing laws attached to podcasting means I can't play you that song. Oh, it would be really fitting. I'd love to play it because it's the perfect song to make some final pictures to, and I think it fits really well with the style, with the approach to this particular show, with the feeling of this particular show. And it would have been a fine tribute to an artist, certainly on my Spotify summer playlist. I mean, there's a hint of whimsical with strong notes of beautifully melodious. A vintage, sir, I believe. But what I can do, I can't play that, but what I can do is play this song I've found featuring Marl Thompson from an artist called Anthony Lazzaro, who you may well know is a favourite of mine. And they appear within the song together. It's Marl's notes that you mainly, or tones that you mainly hear, but you do hear them both together. And it's a perfect song to make some final pictures to. And it's a song I've been keeping in my must-play as the play-out song unofficial playlist for quite some time now, because it reminds me so much of the beautiful, poetic, breezy, childlike tones of Astrid's performance. So it's a tribute to Astrid, and I'll leave a film link to her on the show page today. In the meantime, let's go make a final picture or two to this. Like a Song.
You're like a song that I sing in the morning on a perfect holiday. You're like the warmth of the sun on my skin when clouds look gray. You're like the joy of a trip that's coming to a place with ocean view. You're like an old familiar friend when all is new. Sound of the raindrops drumming on a first summer day. You're like the scent of coffee brewing in the morning. You're like the crackling of a fireplace chilly winter night. You're like a cabin made for two while inside is snowing. Oh, oh. Oh, oh. And every time I take a look into your eyes, I get the feeling you know. And do you know that I know that you know? Do you know that I know that you know? 'Cause you lighten up the place just like a movie scene wherever you go. And do you know that I know that you know? Do you know that I know that you know? And when you drop one of your smiles, the sound of tires and violence rise. 'Cause your laughter is the soundtrack of my life. 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 You're like a song that I sing in the morning on a perfect holiday. You're like the warmth of the sun on my skin when clouds look gray. You're like the joy of a trip that's coming to a place with ocean view. You're like an old familiar friend when all is new. When all is new. You're like a song that I sing in the morning on a perfect holiday.
Like a Song from Miles Thompson and Anthony Lazzaro. Beautiful. So yes, the slight change of order this week. The PS is going to be the end of the show. I want to make a sketchbook picture first, though. I don't know if you can hear that in the background. We've sort of returned gradually toward the more industrial part of this walk. So I've got horrible power tools in the background. I'm going to get down low. I'm going to go for a Barney angle here of what he must... Let's put your letters on the floor there. Of what he must see as we're walking along this path. A Barney angle of the path. Don't walk in it, Barnes. I'm making a Barney angle. Hold on. F71, shutter speed 900th. Just a final sketchbook image to show where I've walked today. And I'd very much like to know where you've walked. So please email me. stories@photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide, please. If you can manage to resize your pictures. Look at Barnes. Oh, he says I'm pooped. It's warm, isn't it? Right, we've got to get back and edit all this. Today has been a show in many ways about the landscape, its changing faces, and the fact being out there in it, within it, is it's one of the greatest privileges, isn't it? Whether you're a landscape photographer or not, this walking along these paths, this is what kept us on as much the straight and narrow as we could possibly find in our lives mentally during that horrible period, which shall not be named. I've learned since making these shows just how much of a treat the landscape can give me photographically, and I don't think of myself as a landscape photographer at all. So a postscript today from Marcel Proust. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Come on, pups. Come on. You can't sit there all day. Come on.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.